continue with this morning's broadcast and looking at the last segment of this morning's edition of News and Views. We're going across to be joined by journalist and researcher at the Media Review Network. We're talking about the United Kingdom, and I've noticed many other countries have actually backed Morocco's plan for the autonomy for Western Sahara. We're talking about the Sahrawi region as well, but also we know that historically this has been a bone of contention with Algeria as well, who have been a staunch supporter of Sahrawi independence. They actually cut diplomatic ties with Morocco in 2021. And we've seen the criticism that has come through from Algeria in terms of Western support for the plan, for the Moroccan plan, because the plan doesn't talk of total independence, it talks of partial independence. Joining us now, Mariam, Jooma, Çarikçi. Mariam, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Jooma Mubarak and welcome.
Alaikum salam, Jazakallah. Thank you for having me.
Yes, clearly, this has been the occupation on the African continent that has been a bone of contention for a very, very long time. And over the years, we've just seen the concerns that have been raised. On the one hand, you've got the Sahrawi people wanting their independence. On the other side, we've seen Morocco, total refusal. And now we are faced with this latest plan, but that plan is also not without any controversy. We've seen Algeria making their position known. We've seen Western countries like the UK and many others supporting the Moroccan proposal. Let's make sense of this, Mariam.
Thank you, Uncle Inayat. This conflict really goes back, centuries. If we look at the idea of colonial roots of the conflict, so in 1884, Spain had actually colonized this particular area. So it's a very sparsely populated, but definitely resource-rich part of Morocco, the region that incorporates the Moroccan coast as well. And essentially what happened since 1975, when Spain actually withdrew from the area, was that Morocco and Mauritania, so two countries had laid claim to this territory. And then you found the development of the Polisario Front, which is the liberation movement for the Sahrawi people that took up arms basically to fight for independence. So as you've said, it's been a long time in its form of protection. If you look at 1991, this is when the UN actually brokered a ceasefire. So it's interesting that we know a lot about the UN missions around the world, but I think very few people know of the United Nations mission for the referendum of the Western Sahara. And what this basically did was to say that we need to have a referendum on sovereignty and on independence. So to what extent are the people of Western Sahara voting for their own independence? And since 1991, when this UN mission was set up till now, there's been no referendum. So where we are now, as you've said in your opening, is you have various countries that are negotiating bilaterally with the Moroccan government to kind of recognize their sovereignty over the area of Western Sahara. And as the African Union sees it, it's considered an occupation. And I think, there's a lot to be said about how we define independence and which causes we put our support behind. Who do we support? Because if you look at the Ukraine, the West are clearly in favor of Ukrainian independence. However, when it comes to Palestine or Western Sahara, you have countries like the UK that are completely in favor of the occupying country. So essentially what UK's moves have done is to put now 3 members of the Security Council, that's France, the US, and the UK, in favor with Morocco, which really weakens the case of the Sahrawi people in the sense of their ability to move forward in implementing UN resolutions.
Yes, and also, Mariam, interesting, you speak about Palestine because I'm just looking at the picture on my screen right now. The flag of the Sahrawi Republic, exactly the same flag, except for the star and the moon, where the white here in the Middle East. So, that is quite noticeable as well because,
Mhm.
they are seeking independence as much as the Palestinians are seeking independence. And I just want to focus a bit now on Algeria, and Algeria obviously has been the staunch supporter of Sahrawi independence. But what we see in terms of the Moroccan proposal, it talks about limited autonomy under Moroccan sovereignty rather than full independence for Sahrawi and the Sahrawi people.
Yes, so as it stands, Morocco basically controls 80% of the area that is considered Western Sahara. So essentially, economically, they are completely under, the control of Morocco. They have no autonomy in any substantive way. And perhaps it's also important to highlight that the Moroccan people themselves are living under an authoritarian monarchy. So while Morocco has the trappings of a prime minister and a parliament and ministers and so on, they actually are all under subject to the king. So King Mohammed VI actually makes all the decisions. So he's essentially the head of state and the monarch at the same time. So we, as you see in other cases like the UK, there is a separation between the royal family and the actual governing body of the institution of government. And here is where the question of Palestine and Israel comes in very, how would you say? I think, it's really nefarious the way Morocco has behaved in terms of normalizing with Israel, using the Abrahamic Accords as a form of economic support for its state, while at the same time imposing an occupation. And this is where we see Algeria's position is staunchly anti-occupation, staunchly in favor of the Polisario Front. We have to remember that Algeria also hosts about 176,000 refugees. So those are Western Saharan people who are in Algeria, living as refugees in Algeria. So there's a major overlap here between the peoples and, of course, the security of the borders between Algeria and Morocco and the Western Sahara. So I think it's important for us to distinguish between the African Union's position, which is very much anti-occupation. It does not support the Moroccan position. And the Western states, as we've said now, three permanent members of the United Nations Security Council will support Morocco. And it's important to ask why. I mean, why would they be doing this if it's such a clear case of an occupation? And this is where the economic benefits basically outweigh everything else. So the Western Sahara is really, really resource rich, as we said before. You can think of their phosphate reserves almost as you would of oil in the Gulf. So their phosphate, is a backbone of their economy, and that's in terms of exporting foreign exports, and it's also state controlled, which means that the Moroccan state needs to maintain its stranglehold over the Western Sahara in order to keep a key component of its economic power under its domain. And then we have fishing. So you have licenses, you have the EU that are continuously fishing on the coast of the Western Sahara, on the Atlantic coast, despite the fact that it's illegal, because according to the European Court, Western Sahara is distinct from Morocco. However, those fishing fleets continue to exploit the Western Sahara waters. So, I mean, these fishing licenses are obviously a major incentive for Morocco to keep its control over the territory. And then there's also the issues of renewable energy. So when it comes to the UK actually in partnership with Morocco to basically receive solar and wind energy from the Sahara via an undersea cable. So it's called the X-Links UK Morocco Power Project. So yes, there's a lot that's actually feeding into this that has really nothing to do with human rights and everything to do with the dollar.
Well, it certainly is. And, as we know, the famous saying, there's no honor amongst thieves. And as you've described, and the interests and the economic interests and the economic benefits are obviously overshadowing these efforts to actually decolonize the region, and also at the same time to provide full independence to the Sahrawi people. So we see where the motivation is actually coming from. Mariam, as always, Jazakallah for your time. Have yourself a great Jummah, inshallah, and also a wonderful Eid. Eid Mubarak to you.
Jazakallah. Before we go, Uncle Ian, I do want to raise one point that I didn't mention, and that is that it's interesting to see how Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso are actually supporting Morocco. So where we've discussed, the anti-colonial liberation kind of fervor that's coming from that part of the continent, it's interesting to see that where it comes to economic benefits, they too have aligned with Morocco. Something for us to keep an eye on.
Well, definitely, and I'm sure we will find some time to discuss that particular aspect that you've raised, Mariam. But as always, Jazakallah for your time, and I know it's a busy schedule. You take off and to be with us right here on Salam Media, but we do appreciate it. All the best to you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Walaikum salam.
Mariam Juma Çarikçi joining us this morning, and that brings us to the end of the broadcasts this morning, right here on Salam Media. We still will be leaving you with Fired Up with Hafiz Imran Chunara, and he is the personal excellence mentor and CEO of Africa Muslims Agency. And just to remind you that this was an hour that was brought to you by none other than Africa Muslims Agency. Well, it's time for me to take leave of you, and once again remind ourselves that today we have got a double bonus. It is the day of Jooma. It is also our day of Arafah as well. So it gives us an opportunity to get even closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let us remind ourselves that being the day of Jummah, to increase our salutations, our salam, and our durood to Nabi sallallahu alayhi wasallam, the recitation of Surah Kahf, as we always encourage our listeners, our viewers to do, and the ulama encourage us as well. There's huge benefits in those as well, and also the big sacrifice tomorrow, the day of Eid, Eidul Adha. Well, from all of us right here at Salam Media, we wish you well. And the topic is by Hafiz Imran Chunara is, what is your culture on Fired Up? And we know that sometimes we have many cultural practices, but let's look at it purely from a Sharia perspective. The Qurbani that we will be embarking and undertaking tomorrow, inshallah, that obviously has got huge significance, both from a spiritual, from a social perspective as well. So, inshallah, we wish each one of you a wonderful Eid, but also at the same time, while we observe this Eid in our happiness, and rightfully so, we should be happy on this day of Eid. While we're observing the celebrations, the joy that Eid actually brings with it as well, let us pay a thought of the sacrifices that millions upon millions are making in many other parts around the world, and particularly looking at Gaza, looking at Palestine, looking at Al Quds. And this should be uppermost on our mind. And at the same time, these are wonderful occasions. These are occasions where we get closer to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let us open up, raise our hands, let us open up our hearts, let us pour our hearts when we are in dua to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to ease the plight of the ummah, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Have yourself a great Eid and a wonderful weekend, inshallah.